Organizational democracy. What is it? What does it really mean? Why does it matter? And what on earth does organizational democracy have to do with an early 20th century management thinker, theorist, and prophet of management named Mary Parker Follett? Good now to you. And wherever and whenever you are, my name is Ryan Erickson with Red 42. And here with me on the right side of your screen is Niels Flagging. And today we will be discussing and diving in to this lovely, wonderful, and so delicious topic of organizational democracy and the BetaCodex. So, Niels, welcome to the space, as you are here with me every week.
Thank you for allowing me to join again, Ryan.
Oh, about these things. The door's always open for you here in our live space. So, So to start here, the first question is, what do we mean? The title of the episode was Democracy at Work. Organizational democracy, one of the most common themes that we talk about in the BetaCodex. What does it mean? And how did that show up in the BetaCodex? If you want to lead with that a little bit, we can riff on there.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to start, Ryan?
Well, what do I think it means? I went through in the process of thinking about that. Democracy, again, meaning this withness that it is deciding the democracy, the first thing, okay, versus authoritarianism, right? That's the polarity. So where is the source of authority? Is it in the demos, in the people, or is the source of authority in the position? And is it for decision making, for all those things? Is that what is the reason to have power with people and decision making with people versus what may seem to be, and I hear this a lot when we're talking about democracy, is this, democracy is inefficient. It takes too long to make a decision. Everyone has to about some decision or another.
Deeply depressed these days, right?
Well,
the whole country is deeply depressed and uneducated about democracy, right?
Well,
how it works, how it's defended.
I would have to agree in certain instances. Again, the public presentation of American democracy is to a certain extent correct in terms of there's not much visible ownership of one's citizenship and involvement in the process.
No, that's
well. I would say I'm talking about visibility. I'm talking about visibility, just among people and among folks who I speak with in informal things, is that there's a lament about personal responsibility for process of civic governance. So that the statistics say there are so few people involved in local government, which has direct impact. The voting populace is only a third of people vote. I mean, I don't know the specific statistics, but that theme of citizenship and ownership, why we can talk about America writ large, which is fine, but in an organization, I think in this context, personal responsibility and membership and commitment and citizenship, organizational citizenship, I think is again far behind where we even are in American culture, because there's been an assumption of that command and control, authoritarian rule, efficiency is the prime need. And that is, I don't agree. I believe that it is in the relationship between people, and it is in the, again, I don't want to tip our hat or tip our hand too early, but the idea of unity, not uniformity. Again, the quote from Mary Parker Follett, and as her theme will come through, is that integration of opinion, integration of dissent into better decisions through a democratic process. Okay, so I went through a lot of stuff there. Given that, and what I think democracy means as an opposition to authoritarianism, and why that's more important in organizations, please tear it to shreds, support it to the nth degree, or
Yeah.
go
And
somewhere else.
we do not have to agree, but let me give you an example where in America, let's talk a little bit about democracies, democratic societies, so just so that we do not create some sort of vagueness or misunderstanding here. I have so many great examples, even about America. I mean, I live in Germany now, but I lived in America for about 5 years, so I know a thing or two about America as well, and American democracy, I think. And of course, I'm a lifelong student of democracies and American democracy as well. It's one of my great interests, the birth of democracy and so on. But one of the things I would like to remind everyone of is when the last elections, national elections, happened in America, and of course the election results were then questioned by the Trumpists and the MAGA extremists. There were these Giuliani processes, I think, the legal processes against election result and supposed election fraud and so on. And I remember well that the citizens actually doing, how was it called in English? Running the local election posts.
Yeah,
protested against the hideous insult that fraud happened in their election.
the allegations. Yeah,
exactly. Against the global allegation in Georgia, I think there was an interesting case where the local people helping citizens, ordinary citizens of all tribes, all Democrats and Republicans, and from all tribes and colors and so on, where they said, this is an insult to our work as citizens here as election helpers, as people doing the election work, volunteers, normal people, doing this kind of work in a democracy. So this is very interesting. Citizenry in a democracy involves so many things. It's not just voting. It's not just being in a parliament, being a representative or so, governor or whatever. It is local representation. It is of course, doing not-for-profit work. Doing social work and so on. There are literally thousands of facets of democratic voicing, running campaigns, initiatives, and so on. So democracy is very vivid, very striving in America. Of course, there's also, I think the mere fact that we are talking about this indicates that there is a lack of public space in which democracy and citizenship and the options that we have of engaging in democracies are discussed. So this is also a forum of talking about these things. So we're doing our duty here, our democratic duty of discussing the power of citizenry and the facets of the manifold facets of
the facets of citizenship. Voting is not enough.
Voting is just this. It's just a grain in the democratic process. There are so many other facets. Oh, Peter Paul is commenting here. I remember a quote in our open space communities that describes the extent of misunderstanding of democracy. US is not a democracy. Somebody said apparently. That's just what the US are a republic but a republic is a democracy. Not sure what Peter wants to express.
Well, that again, that's a several episode topic around what the structure is of the American democracy. Again, you being a student of it, we're talking about democratically elected representatives to a federal republic, which is divided by a tricameral state.
A republic is supposedly not a democracy. That's bullshit. That's just bullshit. Modern democracy is always organized in a republic. Is it a representative democracy? Direct democracy is a trivial thing to think of and not a plausible model for today's society. So Peter, thank you for contributing this. There's so many misunderstandings around democracy and about democracy at work. Of course, some people may think, sadly, that democracy at work means voting bosses or something. There are a few books in German published about democracy at work that totally confuse and equal democracy at work with voting shitty chefs. right? Bosses, I mean. That's just nonsense. You don't have to vote if you are decentralized, right? For us at the BetaCodex movement, we understand that organizational democracy can only function in decentralization. Command and control means centralization, authoritarian, paternalistic steering, and so on.
Dependency, yeah.
Yeah, dependency. Yeah, there's so many facets of that, of course, we want to talk about today. Does that still make sense, right? We don't have to agree, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He's agreeing, I see in the chat.
Yeah, so we do get to see the chats for those of you who are live, and we also
the new comments. Peter, if you post something, it will be displayed here. We never had that. That's great. Okay, let's do it.
So Peter so we'll do this in a way that Peter will be part of this episode in virtual space. So if he wishes to, you can say shut it off. But
so very profoundly that organizational democracy is only possible in a decentralized mode of organizing, and that's why we call this today in this session the Follettian School of Managing, or the Follettian School of Organizing, because Mary Parker Follett in a way probably was the first to suggest this kind of not power over organizing, but power with, which is the democratic stance at work. She used the term decentralization as well, by the way, interestingly, already. So she had a pretty thorough understanding of how that would work.
Yeah, and it is among the Western world, and from Enlightenment liberalism and the thinkers of that age, we developed a pretty strong structure that has held again even through the craziness that was 2020. The process held, and there was great and deep dispute, which is exactly what is supposed to happen. And again, depending on where you come from and what story you tell yourself and about others, whether that was just or not, but the process was executed, and we are still here. We are not a smoking ash of rubble here in the U.S. So thank goodness for that.
Yeah. And of course, Brazil had a similar. As some might know, I lived in Brazil for 12 years. That Brazilian, I'm not sure exactly how to call it. There was something like a storm on a Brazilian institution in Brasilia, the city.
Riot, revolt.
Let's say a riot in Brasilia. So of course, democracies are under fire. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a zeitgeist thing, and it probably comes from we have been too sloppy. We citizens, we the people, we have been sloppy Democrats. We have been content with voting, and maybe the problem was that presidents like, let's say, Clinton, Obama were good enough. It was good enough to vote and let things happen and not to get involved. Most of us, many of us. Of course, many people got involved always in citizens.
Well, there's that, and there's
these election organized. There's so many ways to engage.
Well, I think the other bit of that has played in, again, the prevalence and strength and persuasiveness of media sources, and the prevalence of them, and the speed of them, and the incentives that accelerate them. Yeah. And if one is not paying strict attention to principles that they believe in, and just kind of thinking for yourself, and not just abdicating your thinking to what you're watching.
Sure.
Even all those of you who are watching this want to think what we think, that's great. But anyway,
and by and large, in many countries, I think everywhere in the world, by now the fascists have built their own media empires. I will not mention any American media groups that are close to that. But
all right. The word fascism is one of the most poorly. It's thrown around at people from many places, and I think it's important to make a distinction. And when you say a fascism, that the fascist Nazi, and then that's immediately going into the othering, and you're a fascist, blah blah blah. When you say that, what specifically do you mean in the context of comparison to democracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it should be defined. Yes, you're right.
Well,
Fascism
distinction.
involves disdain for democracy, racism, nationalism, anti-Semitism, all the bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
And a willingness to destroy democracy, certainly. Yeah. It's a flavor of authoritarianism. I think actual communism is really not a threat nor an issue these days, because even the supposed communists like Vladimir Putin are really not communist but fascist, I would say. Yeah. Is that enough to clarify? I'm not sure our viewers might have. By the way, there's a great Argentinian movie, Argentina 1985.
Yes. Oh, you recommended that.
Yeah, I recommended it. You didn't watch it yet. It's
not
brilliant.
yet.
So you get a flavor of the fight for democracy. I mean, all our democracies were built by people who fought for them. I mean, the American founding fathers were fought, and when I visited Philadelphia and heard about the story that somebody rode on a horse or so for a week or two to get to Philadelphia for the critical vote for the constitutional vote or whatever it was. So people really sacrificed, made very strong sacrifices to build our democracies, and of course we, and I include myself there, we kind of often fool ourselves that to defend a democracy, voting correctly is enough.
With that, maybe this also, I like what you brought there in terms of the personal commitment to participating in governance, and that the not populist, but the popular participation in government, and that in what we see as as a fascist authoritarian kind of structure is that no, we know what's best here at the top. We're going to tell you what's best. We're going to propagandize here and there. So you, the public, may only support us in the way that we choose to do things, because the government owns means of production. That business entwinement with government is very obscure and obtuse, not transparent. But again, that's not what I wanted to bring in, that the idea of individual responsibility to produce artifacts that articulate what this nation is about. A declaration of independence, a constitution that outlines the right, and that is flexible, and is flexible in the context of other structures, that you have representation. You have representation in multiple ways to
separation of power, free press,
separation of power,
protest.
Yes. And those things are established through and you can go down rules versus principles, and how granular you are depending on the size of what you're doing.
Yes.
And I think getting back to the BetaCodex also in this, I think those ideas of principles of agreement and interaction, that's hard work.
Yes.
To create that side, and that was hard work. All the Constitutional Convention and all of that, and obviously the Revolutionary War and Civil Wars that happened in conflict. But so my mind flipped in a way, and a better understanding of that, and this is to get this better understanding from someone who has not born here and grew up in the educational system of America. So one might think it's crazy, but you shared the 12 Angry Men movie. I had never seen it, and seeing people in such deep conflict, and one person stands up for, I believe in the principles of the process. We are here, regardless of the valence and level of dissent with that is here, to wrestle with this issue and seek unity and integration and the truth as best we understand it based on what we know. And that came, so that flipped my head and said, oh, how might we apply this process in a relatively small group to respect each other's authority, respect each other's ability and skill, and decide based on that mastery together, and not just fold to the most charismatic person, but to really seek deep truth and direction, connectedness with purpose. I mean, I'm going to go through all 12 principles when we talk about this. And
yes, the 12 principles of the BetaCodex are a manifesto for democracy, right?
absolutely.
The BetaCodex distinguishes itself from 12 principles, the manifesto for non-democratic organizing, command and control Taylorism, if you want to say so.
Exactly.
So yeah, whenever I hear that, but beta it just seems to be an option and it seems to be limited. No, it allows for all ways of democratic organizing. I mean, in organizations, right? And I always always understood that nobody wants alpha because it's undemocratic. It's authoritarian, paternalistic, fascist, even, if we want to provoke a little bit. Just in case we would want to provoke a little bit.
Yeah.
No, but it's very, 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 very elementary to the BetaCodex that it opposes authoritarianism. It's nothing more and nothing less than defining what's decent, what's democratic, what's humane organizing.
What is lean, right? Respect for people, deep respect for people, respect for the human dignity of it.
Everybody wants that, I suppose. If they do not want it, they don't understand it yet.
Yeah. And this is, and again, the other issue. I think again bashing a little bit, being too generic about the abdication of one's agency. Say, I vote for this guy and he'll make all the decisions, or she'll make all the decisions, or whoever, I've done my part by clicking the lever or pressing the button. And
in a way, of course, democratic ways of organizing, they mean that we, the people, make decisions. It's not them, not the managers, not the top, not the CEOs, but that everybody makes important decisions and around the daily business, but beyond as well. So this kind of distribution of decision making into the organization through decentralization, through self-organized team structures, that is essential to organizational democracy, which again is not about Republican representation, or democratic representation is not really what's the core, the key. That's where you cannot just compare organizational democracy with societal democracy. They are different things, right?
Well, if it's a different sphere of activity, there's a different purpose.
Different expressions of democracy. Right? Democracy finds a different expression in organizations than in our societies, through different mechanisms. And for example, one of the very democratic elements of beta organizations, of decentralization, is that the periphery owns the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's not a centralized treasury that is, taxes are collected,
or the CEO who has the money and bestows it upon underlings and projects and investments or whatever through the budget. So
the Office of Management and Budget, the Alpha Office, right?
Exactly, the unity of decision-making authority and responsibility for value creation and having the money, that is the essence of decentralization as we understand it in BetaCodex. Like in Handelsbanken, where the branches say the branch is the bank. The branches make the profit. The branches also have to cover credit losses. If the bank, if they give if a credit turns sour, they also have to assume the cost of the defaulted.
But the branch takes responsibility for its activity.
For the whole business, really, right? And the headquarters basically serve the periphery, serve the business, which is the periphery. So this kind of notion that the responsibility and the influence, the authority and the responsibility are united, are coherent. That's very essential to a democratic spirit. Like, we are in charge as citizens in our democratic societies. We are in charge. It's not Mr. Biden or Mr. Scholz in Germany, for example. Presidents are not in charge. They just have certain duties representing us in certain matters and so on. So yeah,
I think
means that people are in charge in specific.
People are in charge.
Teams are in charge, right? Teams.
Groups of people connected to a purpose to achieve a joint result to, that is beneficial for the society as a whole, right? I mean, this I think was something I read in Drucker this morning in the Orange book.
Yes, Peter Drucker also was a severely democratic thinker, of course, with his history, understanding fascism.
And I had no
fascism. Yes.
I had no idea. Again, I read one of the papers that I kind of went through in preparing for today actually mentioned specifically that Mary Parker Follett was a mentor of Drucker, that they had interaction, and that again maybe they're making some spurious connections, but it was specifically said in this particular. God, get the paper out there. But in any case, we are talking about Mary Parker Follett coming from social action into and then applying that learning from social action.
Yes,
in my city of Cincinnati, by the way, and applying that into organizational life, and then having an influence on those individuals that we hold up as carriers of the torch, and the lighting of the torch for the BetaCodex, as in Peter Drucker, Deming, Akoff, and all the figures that we hold up there.
Yeah, we're all very democratic thinkers. I mean, just to remind everybody who might be listening or watching, Follett was a very thorough thinker on democracy. Kurt Lewin, Peter Drucker, Deming, of course. All our heroes, including people like Henry Mintzberg, of course, were fervent defenders of democracy and are fervent defenders of democracy.
And the go ahead as you finish.
And we despise the fascists.
we label them. We okay, all right. The toxic.
We can make them as authoritarian.
I
think authoritarianism sounds too soft, right? That's why
so
to use the term all the time. Of course, authoritarianism, all forms and shapes of authoritarianism are bad, right?
Sure. Well, and again, there is a risk that you and I talk about this a lot. We talk about this in our circle of folks who care about interrelationships and org physics of the three types of leadership and influence and social systems and all that stuff. And it's easy to get really deep and say, oh, authoritarianism is, of course, it's evil, bad, awful. Okay, now let's talk about the real stuff about what democracy means. So it's important to remember the audience of people who are listening and who may think, what are you talking? Authoritarianism? My business is authoritarian? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And what is the word authoritarian? It means that there's blind allegiance to authority and positional authority, very specifically, and that if the authority to make decisions on behalf of the system, on behalf of others, is vested positionally, as opposed to based on mastery or based on joint decision making, that is what we're talking about. And we're talking about
blind authority, blind. How did you call it? Blind submission to authority.
Well, there's deference.
I also call it learned helplessness is part of it, I think.
Yeah.
Centralization of power, the division between responsibility and value creation.
Accountability, responsibility, authority. Those words, it's important to have a clear distinction on what we're talking about. And that what that difference between power, authority, and the decision making, and because really, and what does that mean? What kind of, do we have agreements for what we're doing? Are those agreements crafted in a sense where there's dissent and there's integration? And I guess the point is that authoritarianism, authority is in the word that is, as opposed to democracy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, command and
What
control or management, the social technology is based on the assumption that some lead and steer and decide, and others don't. Others are followers, underlings, cogs in the
what
machine,
it's
right?
the
Ultimately, everybody ends up losing, and everybody ends up being a cog in the machine, even the managers, the executives, and so on. But the supposed leaders,
because there's this separation, there's this vertical, again, if you think top down, that everyone thinks that there's this separation of accountability and responsibility.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not accountable to you, Niels. I'm accountable to Bob, and
Yes.
Bob is accountable to Mary, who is accountable to whomever, who is,
Yes.
and even at the CEO, we've talked about this before too. The CEO is accountable to the board, is accountable to the investors. That we said this before. I think this is, everybody has a boss. Everybody has a boss.
Yes.
And
And
that's
Mary Parker Follett, she said something like, the ultimate boss is the situation, which
yes. Oh God, there's a quote. You're bringing the quote up, and this is
you find it if you can find it.
Well,
please.
I think I can find it here, but this, to those of you who are out there listening, know that there's the two books. There's the What Would Deming Do, What Would Drucker Do, and I think we are going to have a book of Mary Parker Follett quotes.
Yes, well, there is a book of Mary Parker Follett quotes. I know it's edited by a French guy, François Héron. I have to look it up what it's called. Oh, François Héron, I think is his name.
So
essential. There is a book of quotes. It's called "The Essential Mary Parker Follett Ideas We Need Today." So if anybody's interested in the book of quotes, one of those already exists. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So here, this may be kind of the quote, but may not. And this is another thing. So the quote is, "Leader and followers are both following the invisible leader, the common purpose."
The common purpose. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So and the
law of the situation. I think she expresses it differently in that article. Yeah. And which is of course connected to what we call value creation. Yeah. If everybody serves value creation, you do not have to serve bosses, because you serve the client. You end up having the client or the market as the boss, the power of the situation, the power of value creation, or the primacy of value creation. And then why have centralized steering? You do not need it. If you organize for flow, you do not have to manage it, as Tate famously said. Yeah. Because
the leader is again, it's common, but the leader is the market. The leader is the situation.
Yeah.
I guess the language of leader, personification of leader, is as the leader being the authority, right? The personification of that authority.
Yes.
The static.
That's the end of organizational democracy. Very well put.
As soon as you fix the authority in a person, or even in a small group of people, when it is fixed, there, it is not dynamic. It is not serving a common purpose that shifts in complexity at complexity.
Yes.
Yeah. So
very well put.
And I think we're making a great case for democracy versus authoritarianism.
It should be the most logical thing. It's just that there is not much reflection even about organizational democracy. There have been some people have been interested in it, including people like Todd Bridgman, of course, I think, who has
Ron Purser again, also.
Yeah, exactly. So there are people, of course, talking about organizational democracy. It's not that it doesn't exist, but it's more like the Minority Report, right? Most researchers and practitioners still try to optimize organizational authoritarianism and command and control. That's organizational fascism, so to speak.
Well,
and this democratic series. By the way, personally, I have always been fascinated by the democratic spirit of beta organizations. One great book about it is Joy at Work by Dennis Bakke about AES, the energy company, American energy company, 20,000 people at the time, were very much hyped in the 1990s. Very democratic company, and there are several hints at democratic principles in that case, in that book as well. If you let workers decide more things than just the daily business, like doing treasury, for example. There's an example in the book about a worker from a factory doing treasury, calling a bank to get
cash flow, like a cash flow
adjusted, through. So why shouldn't ordinary workers do that shit as well? Why do you have to have academics and finance people to do that kind of work, which really doesn't require anything else? Than picking up the telephone and being authorized in doing the job.
Well, there's certain tasks that are systemically complicated, a level of complicatedness to them that can be managed by rules. And there are other tasks that require discernment, that require thought, that require humanity, right? So, but there's, again, this goes into the idea of mastery.
Okay, not everybody can pilot a plane. Can we agree on that?
or not
brain surgery.
Exactly.
That's not a good idea. But most other things, they can be done by most people, There are exceptions from this, like in a pharmaceutical company, there are qualifications that you have to be very, very strictly qualified and certified to do to sign certain
certification does matter in certain situations when what's at stake. I think that's
so many things can be done by everyone who cares enough and who is willing to take the responsibility. And I think, of course, this is one of the side effects, one of the collaterals of over specializations, of silos thinking, of functional division, or silo creating, really silo building and narrowing people's functional responsibility, is that all these silos create, they tend to aggrandize their work, their responsibilities, and make it overcomplicated and try to make access difficult and so on. That's how
gatekeeping.
That's how we tick, right? But once you create functionally integrated cells, of course, you create a liberty, literally a liberty and freedom to assume many roles. Again, there are exceptions, compliance stuff, and so there are exceptions. But so many. We just have this in a case. We are doing this discussion around, okay, what are the things that can be integrated in periphery cells? What are the functions that should be there? From preparing the work to quality to
hiring
stuff. What? Yes? Hiring, of course. Exactly. Brilliant. Yes. Yeah. So once you look at these functions one by one critically, what do they require? Why do we have specialists for those things? Why have we centralized those functions and taken away responsibility from people doing the work, for those things? You end up finding that people should be responsible for most of those things. Right?
Well, why have we outsourced our mastery in certain domains?
Exactly. Many companies have outsourced way too much, right? They should insource certain functions and activities again to have more authority, to have more, to have more adaptivity, to be more
flexibility. And I think it almost sounded like you were trying to avoid the A word.
The A word is what? What is the
agility? The word of agile, to be
exactly. It's not that agility anymore.
But it's an important attribute. I mean, I don't mean to be used as pejorative, but it's important. Flexibility.
But recruiting is really, you brought up recruiting. Recruiting is an excellent example. If you outsource recruiting, you're done. You cannot do it. You never get back. So.
And you want the people who know the work to be intimately involved in hiring others who will aid them in doing the work and provide that level of. And this is another thing that there is a status hierarchy in terms of mastery. You can't deny that a person is more masterful at a particular skill than someone who is not familiar with it.
Yes.
And but the is the idea, and that's mastery-based authority, right? So that's kind of authoritarian in a very micro way, but that's the exertion of that power as an authority figure, that I am great at using this tool to produce this result. You're new at it. You want to do that. You are part of this group that we are connected to this joint purpose to create value for these people. And we wish to grow our mastery, that it's not a win-lose situation. It's shared authority. That skill does not degrade when it is shared. This is social learning also, and we're talking about that. And also, again, it's another beta principle.
And to mastery applies what I call the Superman principle, or the Superman motto: out of great power comes great responsibility. Mastery is a power that
Spider-Man. That's Spider-Man.
Did I say Superman?
It's Superman.
I meant Spider.
Yeah, you meant Spider.
Out of great power comes great responsibility. So people with mastery, of course, they are responsible to themselves and to everyone to use their powers responsibly, and to promote, to not abuse them, but to
wield that power ethically.
Exactly.
Ethically, responsibly, humanely. And this idea of I'm responsible for this skill that I have and using it, or this tool, or what have you, in whatever regard. But I am responsible for my use, my own action, and
to use it for value creation in this.
For value creation. Also, I think, and then this is where the leadership that exists between people is in that I am accountable not only to myself, but I am accountable to you who are here with me in this moment. We are sharing this responsibility, that we are working together in joint purpose to create value. And I mean,
mastery wants to be applied in the with each other, for each other spirit of collaboration and working in value creation. Exactly.
And this is, again, we go straight into the writings, teachings, and of Mary Parker Follett, and I think in the title of the episode is the FOLLETTIAN school, and that what's the FOLLETTIAN school? There's not really a school
in this video cast. We never talked about really properly about the FOLLETTIAN school, right?
Yeah. Well, what's the opposite of the FOLLETTIAN school? Right.
Yes.
I'll put it out. It's the Taylorist school, and that Taylorism separated from Fred Taylor, who was a man of his time, for his time, and his teachings were abused and accelerated to unethical levels by the social technology of management. But the FOLLETTIAN school, I can't say that the FOLLETTIAN ideas are not taught, because I've seen enough research papers, and they are taught. But there's some friction about bringing those principles of FOLLETTIAN management, if I could use that word, into organizations at a large scale, meaning just many organizations working in a FOLLETTIAN fashion. That I don't know the reason why. Is that there's a unfamiliarity with what it feels like to work in this way, and I don't know what do you think is a barrier or obstacle to FOLLETTIAN?
It's again how we think about people at work. The old pattern, the old theme, that if we assume that people are dumb and lazy and foolish and irresponsible at work, then there is no way to construct organizational democracy. There's no way to apply BetaCodex principles or the FOLLETTIAN idea of organizing if you think that people are abominable minions.
That's just Douglas. I mean, another of the heroes of the influential figures of the BetaCodex movement being Douglas McGregor, and the belief of but the mindset about people in organizations being incapable or capable and having possibility. And I love quotes, but I don't often remember exactly who generated them. But there's treat a person as they are, and they will behave as they are. But treat a person as they could be, they will behave as they could be. I don't know if that's Goethe who said that in that way, or
I'm not sure either.
but yeah, again, I'm kind of taking that. If you think of man as human, treat a man as he is, he will behave as he is. Treat a man as he could be, and he will behave as he could be. Um, which is a pretty beta principle of treating people with respect for and showing respect for their skill, their mastery, and respect for their human dignity. And this is, if that's not at the core of how you sponsor your organization, you have, if you as a generator of a value creating entity, I'm trying not to say leader of an organization, because that's the language that, but this is what I mean. If someone who is an authority and has created something, if
We might
that
call him a sponsor. We might call such a
yeah,
person, such an individual who opens the space for an organization to become democratic. We call them a sponsor, right? In open space beta, it's a word we use in open space beta approach to transformation.
And it's again partially the connection to the initial work of Harrison Owen, who passed away this weekend, is about that opening space. And you said it perfectly.
True Democrat, by the way, Harrison Owen.
Oh my goodness! And he traveled in his travels through the world. He went into the hot zones. He had many. He was involved heavily in the South African democratic movement. He also spent a lot of time in the Middle East, I believe in the 70s. Again, my open space folks will certainly come in and correct on that if they see this. But yeah, opening space for democratic involvement, participation, honest conversation that is this generative of insight and connection. And I think you've experienced it in open spaces. I have experienced it in open spaces, that the story of a day, and is you start out with this discomfort, you go into the center of the circle, you say, hey, my team does this, I want to do that, I want to go there and talk about it, and you're inviting people to participate. And there's tension, there's dissent, and all this kind of stuff that happens. And then at the end of the day, people have connected so deeply, absent the authority and that baggage around it, someone else telling you what to do, is that you deeply connected as human, and there's joy in that work at the end of it. And how beautiful is that? And who would not want to be connected to that? And again, that's just my view of the world. And I know that there are people all along the spectrum of cognitive preferences and proclivities, and that not everybody wants to go to the center of a circle and talk, right? Some people don't like that, but there are ways to engage everyone in participation of a process and creation. I think you've talked about that the open space that happens in open space beta, it's not always this, or maybe not ever in your case, I don't know, you can tell me about that. It's not the traditional sit in a circle, put up a bulletin board, open a marketplace, get to work, those steps, but it's different, and it is accepting very democratically of all people. And I had it on my list of things to talk about, that I had to bring up Bosch, because I love that came in, is that everybody counts or nobody counts. I mean, what more democratic principle to bring forth?
Exactly.
Everybody counts or nobody counts. And that if we bring that principle to the organization, then you open the space for true connection and compassion and all that kind of airy fairy stuff that people, that's the soft stuff. But that soft stuff is, we all have it. And it's important that if we want to do the hard stuff of creating value and having a financial transaction to support further creation of that value, it's important that we acknowledge each other's humanity And
yeah, and I mean this what you're just saying, it connects nicely into, if you want to bring about an organization and an organization democracy, a democratic organization, the change approaches you choose must also embed this. They must also be profoundly democratic. You cannot bring about decentralization and organizational democracy with a command and control approach to change, like change management, traditional sorts variants. Steered planned change doesn't work.
We're going to drive change. We're gonna crush the resistance, and we're going to implement this thing.
Even talking about status quos and resistance to change, those are undemocratic notions, unrealistic notions, really, of how.
That's true. We had an episode about the status quo, and what do we mean by the status quo? It is, again, it's part of the language that needs to be dissolved into. When you talk about the status quo, what are you really talking about? What's underneath that? What
usually it means managers, right? The leaders. That means the status quo. Other dumb shit people, the people,
those other people
than me. That's what status quo means, no?
Well, what other people other than me? I'm this creative wizard, right? And everyone else is some dumb idiot. That's kind of what that. Well, and I think status quo is that things as they are, the system operating in the way that it is operating. And I think stability is one thing. We haven't even really talked about stable systems. This is something that came up from some of the systems thinking reading that I've been doing and trying to get into that deeper, is that the sense of a system operating in flow, at a kind of flow, even with obstructions, that the flow isn't as fast or as productive of value as it could be, but this state of systemic action, right? But irritate it. That's the point. You want to irritate that system in this state to be a more decentralized, flowing, grooving, swinging system, as opposed to a mechanical, a mechanistic, authoritarian, dead system. So,
yes, very nice. I'm happy.
I'm feeling good. Have we solved the world's problems?
Totally.
This
is it. This is the episode.
This is the micro.
We finally solved all the problems. No, I think we covered a bit of ground about democracy of work.
Taylor's and Folletti. The one thing I wrote down that we didn't talk about, maybe talked about a little bit, but I thought we were going to get into, with great power comes great responsibility. That what are the, let us assume, this is maybe a good way to land. If we assume that a democratic organization, that through our efforts to intervene in an existing system, we have created a democratic organization, decentralized, swinging, how might we, or what are the guardrails that need to be in place to ensure the survival of that democratic system? And that one of the guardrails, or one of the dangers that I saw in the reading, and this is, again, I'll turn it over to you, is that there is a risk of a charismatic leader using their sense of persuasion and influence to create compelling narratives that will say, elect me to make the decisions. I have the mastery, whether they're bullshitting or not. But that charismatic leader, and again, I'm using that with the scare quotes on it, that's a danger. And that what are the guardrails to that? And I think some might call the Orange Man an example of that. Others might call, even back to Kennedy, he was accused of being that kind of charismatic leader. We follow this good-looking guy; he's awesome, So that's a risk. A risk of democracy is this charismatic figure. So,
yes, I mean, can any democratic, decentralized beta organization be transformed into a command and control, centralized, authoritarian organization? Yes, it doesn't need more than one. humorously, I like to say, it only requires one asshole.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
Yeah, one evil person at the top can be enough with the sufficient authority. One person can be enough to transform a decentralized organization into a command and control organization. And that has happened often enough. Many organizations become command and control. They turn to command and control. They turn to decentralization and organizational authoritarianism. And most organizations, I would say, they become command and control unwillingly,
or unknowingly.
Unknowingly, yes. Yeah. Sidewinds instability, as we call this phenomenon. There's this sidewind. An organization suffers a crisis and becomes centralized. You create the departments, the controls, the cost management, and boom. Yeah, and that can be very quick. Can happen over the course of decades. I mean, all the German companies, for example, if you take Bosch or Siemens, we know by the Bosch Group founder that he had very democratic ideals about organizing. Yeah? He was a very beta thinker. But once organizations grow, the tension, the crises usually lead to some form of centralization. Or there might be just one asshole joining and, bringing in all the command and control bullshit. So this happens all the time. It can happen to any organization. It happens in societies as well. I mean, Polish democracy has been corrupted and mistreated badly by just one, let's say, one cycle of governance by the PiS party, PIS, I think. PiS. It's an appropriate name for that party. Also, of course, left-wing populists. So it's easy to destabilize a democracy. That's what I'm trying to say. It's relatively easy to destroy a democracy. To create a democracy is much harder because you need to instill citizenry and education, of course, and democratic spirit in a populace to sustain, to create and sustain an organization. I think the American case, again, is so convincing. I recommend movies like Selma, wonderful movie about the work of Martin Luther King. Those are very enlightening movies, I think, about the struggle for a more democratic democracy, a more sustainable and more rounded democracy, and how the fight in this case against segregation was essential to bringing more democratic
process, structure, system
into it's never easy. It's never easy.
No.
Of course, in organizations, it's easy.
Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. I've heard that before.
But of course, in organizations, in companies, that's much easier because you can, with the methods we already talked about, open space beta, involving all the willing, using open space to begin and end, or to open and close the transformation process. So to speak. And those are very effective measures, and it doesn't take more than a few months. Very important to keep in mind.
To do that initial set of flips, right? And I think this also comes to ritualization of the organizational breadth. If you institute an organizational ritual of an open space every 6 months, I mean, this comes from Daniel Mezek's work in the Open Space Agility Handbook, and that we've adopted here in Open Space Beta. But this is how things are done here. That because we have a principle of democratic involvement and participation, and we are a Follettian organization, right? And assuming we are and come into it, and that's then the risk of sponsorship. When sponsorship changes, then the sponsorship of the principle or the ownership of the principle is abandoned. I think that's what you're talking about. That some asshole comes in and says, I don't give two shits about democracy. I need to up the share price this quarter, and then drops a grenade in the middle of this and disrespects the principles and does that. So that's the risk of a sponsorship change. And I think that's 59 minutes. I mean, that's another thing. What does
But some companies, brilliant companies like Toyota or Handelsbanken have managed, or even W.L. Gore, for example, they have managed to sustain their decentralized democratic models of organizing for decades through several CEO-ships, so to speak. So it is totally possible.
It's possible, and it is indicative of that.
By the way, those organizations have rooted democracy in organizational principles, in structure.
The principles. That's what I was going to say. Is about the principles of organizational democracy, and that to respect and honor those and keep those in mind, and in your heart and mind, body, and spirit. So, would some topics for next week maybe come up? Those of you out here who are watching now, please feel to pop something in the YouTube comments, send us either a message on LinkedIn, or join the BetaCodex group on LinkedIn, all those kinds of things. Please let us know what you're curious about. If you think we are totally full of shit and have no idea what we're talking about, I want to hear about it, because what better thing to talk about?
Yeah. By the way, there's another wonderful book, just to finalize from my side.
Sure.
There's this wonderful book by Peter Kostenbaum and Peter Block, Confronting Our Freedom, which I think is a brilliant primer on organizational democracy, even though it doesn't force the topic so much. It's so much about individual freedom and the responsibility and the consequences that come with it, but it's totally about democracy, really. Highly recommended for anybody who might feel inspired to read more about it. And it's really beautiful, fantastic book. Very recent. I think it was published last year, so very new.
And Peter Block is a fantastic thinker who has influenced the work of the BetaCodex as well.
Yes.
I would again be remiss if didn't mention two of Mary Parker Follett's books, Creative Experience and The New State, which are widely available essential works of hers, as well as you mentioned the other books. Hey, Google works, DuckDuckGo, whatever you want to search, Mary Parker Follett books, you got them. I think the topics that we've brought up, some really interesting topics here. Sponsorship, I think, is one that would be interesting to go with. I think Mariana Mazzucato's work, we talked about that. Our friend Peter Prohl, who contributed, I remember him saying something about how the Mission Economy book had something to do with sponsorship, and it was like almost a constitution of great sponsorship. It was fantastic. Sponsorship, systems thinking, I think that's something we be willing to explore, and ACOF and that kind of stuff. So I've got some juice around this. Niels, if there's something you want to offer
get in touch, everybody. Get in touch. See you again soon. Let's discuss. Let's make the world more beta. Let's create a more beta world.
Be more beta. Thank you much. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for your precious gift, for the precious gift of your time and attention. I'm Ryan Erickson, signing off from this place in the Betaverse. See you next week.